This is really a mind-blowing story. You know, when I first saw Trump negotiating with China about landing a huge soy contract, I was like, wow, Trump is selling soy to China? Now that's impressive. You know, maybe Trump has a plan to weaken China by turning Chinese men into soy boys. After all, China has been screwing over U.S. consumers for years with asbestos drywall and lead paint and products that break within a couple weeks. Also, much of the juice coming out of China has been contaminated from industry with heavy metals. So maybe this is payback time. Have a look at this short clip of Trump talking about a huge new soy deal with a senior Chinese official. The numbers are just mind-blowing. After that, I want to break down the math and explain what this all means.
It seems to be coming together. I do appreciate the fact that you said so much about our farmers and that you'll be doing purchases quickly about the farmers. That's really wonderful.
Will 5 million.
You may want to speak up.
5 million.
5 million.
5 million tons of soybeans.
5 million tons of soybeans. Wow.
Per day.
That's great. Per day. That's going to make our farmers very happy. That's a lot of soybeans. Well, that's really nice. And I know they said some other things, and we'll put out a release for the press. But the relationship is very, very good between China and the United States. And
oh, I can hear it from Mega Country right now. Oh, Trump playing four-dimensional chess while the Chinese are playing checkers. Wrong. Let me explain. But first, for the record, Trump has done some good things like criticizing flu shots, canceling the TPP, going after sex traffickers, stopping the expensive wars in the Middle East, also slowing down the war in Korea, Syria, and Iraq. I'm still glad he prevented Hillary from assuming power, but Trump is not a perfect president and far from it. Trump is a developer. He builds things. That's what he does. The man probably never met a tree that he did not want to rip out of the ground and put a building on it. It's true, the Chinese, they do eat tons of soy per day. They also feed soy to hogs and probably export much of that soy feed out of the country. You know, there has been a big push to make all types of food from soy. You got soy sauce, soy milk, soy cheese, soy burgers, soy pasta, soy bread, soy ice cream, and the list goes on, and many vegetarians just gobble it all up thinking this is a healthy food product, when really soy has been proven to be hazardous to your health. Most soybeans are used to paint cars. Soy oil helps the paint stick to metal. That's what makes soy unique. There's also a problem with consumed soy. Think about it. If soy can stick to a car, imagine what soy does inside of your stomach. This is what I believe is preventing your gut from digesting nutrients, thus making people weak and become soy boys. The Chinese in particular like to eat a fermented soy, which is a healthier version. Perhaps the fermentation changes the structure of the soy to do less harm with your digestion. Looking at the math of the soy deal, 5 million tons per day, the United States would have to grow 15 times more soy than it's currently producing. Let me explain to you why that would be a bad idea to commit that many resources to growing that amount of soy. Most of the soy grown in the United States is genetically modified soy crop that is sprayed with glyphosate, a toxic herbicide. Glyphosate use has drastically increased over the past 25 years. Imagine what an extra billion acres of Roundup Ready soybeans would do. Monsanto Roundup Ready soy. What could go wrong, right? Did you know glyphosate has been detected in 75% of rain samples? And it is likely with the expansion of growing soy that most of the soy will not be organic, and the land will become even more toxic from herbicides and pesticides. Bill Mollison said it best when he went to visit the soy fields in Mexico. He could not find one living thing in those fields. No birds, no bees, even the ants had disappeared, and certainly no worms, which are essential to soil fertility. The soil was dead. Now this new soy deal with China would entail over 1,825 million tons of soy per year. That's an astronomical amount of soy. Trump says this will make our farmers happy, but if you were to ask me, any farm that grows only one crop and sprays poison deserves to collapse. And we would be all better off for it. And we'd be much better off with big farm monoculture gone. Some people might go hungry for the first few months, but then neighborhoods and parks would begin to flourish with local organic produce. Foods would just taste better, have more nutrient density. Less gas would be consumed to transport food thousands of miles, and people will get less sick and live happier lives. Check out this cool looking hair spiral. The US currently grows 320,000 tons of soybeans per day. In order for the US to make close to 5 million tons of soy per day, basically every farmer would have to grow soybeans. Currently over 90 million acres are used to grow soybeans. Over 1 billion additional acres would need to be cleared in order to meet the Chinese soy demands. You would have to cut down most of the trees in the US to grow that much soy. Either one of these decisions would have drastic consequences for the USA. Imagine not being able to find a forest to hike a trail on. Hunting would become extinct because most of the animals would be gone. Let's talk about option 1. Most farms in the USA would have to be converted to soy. The US would become a huge monoculture, basically putting all of its eggs in one basket, which is not a smart business decision. Like stocks, you want to be diversified, have less risk. If the US mostly just grew soy, other commodities would become more expensive. The US would have to import vegetables and fruits from other countries like China to make up the difference. Exporting produce would raise the cost of food prices and lower the quality control of the produce. So essentially China is playing the long game, trapping the US into having to import food to keep people from starving. China just last year made threats of completely banning American soy. Ultimately, China could say, "Sorry, Trump, we don't need that much soy," and farmers would be stuck holding the bag of hormone-feminizing beans, which in turn would lead to a soy boy explosion in the US, and that is scary indeed. Now, if you thought the first option is bad, it can get even worse, and that's with option number 2, which is having to cut down most of the trees in the USA to make space to grow 5 million tons of soy per day. Trees are perhaps one of the most important parts of a healthy ecosystem. When you lose the trees, you lose the soil. If they cut most of the trees down, soil erosion would occur on a massive scale. The tree's roots do an important job of holding soils in place. Trees also create rain and air. Trees hold massive amounts of water within its trunks, leaves, and root systems. If you're within a forest of trees, it's like being in a river. If suddenly the moisture were to come out the trees, you'd be under 10 feet of water. If the trees disappear, so will the rain. Most of the US will become an arid desert filled with salt. I believe the Chinese know this, as they've been one of the oldest producing agricultures in the world. They have seen what happens when you cut down trees, the land becomes a wasteland. I think it would take about 15 to 20 years before the whole agricultural system would collapse and most of the land would become almost unfarmable. Let's have a look at Haiti, for example. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Most of the trees were cut down for fuel. The land became barren, and most parts of Haiti have had a hard time of sustaining crops. Have you heard the term mud pies? Well, that's what many Haitians eat. Literally balls of mud flavored with whatever they can get their hands on. Places will literally turn into shit without trees. Most trees should be considered sacred to the landscapes and protected. If you truly want America to be independent, then you need to get away from the monoculture farming system. There is a better way, and that's with working with nature, rather than against it. Food forests could be developed to produce a wide range of nutrition, and certainly variety would mean more options to choose from. Less pesticides would also be used because bugs will only target one specific crop. Communities would become completely self-sustainable, but I'm afraid that's not what big government wants. If your city produces most of the products it needs, then you would no longer need outside help, and people would want even more decentralization, and most of the major corporations that add poisons to our food supply would become obsolete and collapse. Who knew that planting trees and growing your own food would become revolutionary? And that's my American dream. What if I told you one of the major reasons Mexico became a shithole is because of growing mostly GMO crops like soybeans? Would you believe me? It's true. Mexico produces lots of soybeans, and they've had to close down many farms in just the past 10 years because of salt intrusion became too high without the trees. Many people are escaping Mexico because of what unsustainable agricultural farming have done to the environment. The USA is becoming more and more like Mexico because of morally bankrupt farming practices. Nobody explains this process better than the father of permaculture, Mr. Bill Mollison. Rest in peace.
The pigs also have to eat soybeans. So they eat soybeans with fish meal, and Americans get their hogs. Or everybody gets their hogs. Soybeans are grown in Mexico and Brazil in exchange for debt. That is, they're forced to grow it to pay off the debts. Soybeans, nasty little bloody things, have a poison which prevents us taking up protein. So to make them edible, you have to cook them for 6 hours. If you don't cook them for 6 hours, they'll kill you. Nobody in Mexico can cook anything for 6 hours. There isn't enough fuel. It's too expensive. So nobody voluntarily eats soya beans. By all means, they eat pinto beans and they eat other beans. It takes half an hour boiling, but you can't get them to eat soya beans. Soya beans have one essential use. The oil is pressed out of them and they're used to paint cars. And they are the only satisfactory way you can get paint to stick on cars. They have no other really essential uses. But the meats left after you've extracted car paint are a waste product and they are fed to pigs. So they have a nasty crop, quite poisonous, which likes high humus soils, so you've got to clear forest to grow it. More forest has been grown to grow soybeans than ever in history for any other reason. So the whole of the Mississippi forest has been cleared for soybeans. Now Mexico is being cleared for soybeans. And they're down as far as Obregon. And behind it, the salt is covering Mexico. And that's 60 metres deep, that salt. So Mexico is turning into a salt block, all for soybeans. So here's madness, really, on a vast scale. And Mexico is folding up, so now they've started growing them down in Brazil. At the bottom end of the Brazilian rainforests, they've cleared them. 11 years later, it's a howling desert. So you'll see the Amazon fold up underneath the soybean. And what for? So you can paint your car. We eat hardly any soybeans and then only nutters. And the only place you can find them is health food shops, where you'll find a lot of nutters. If you sit outside a health food shop and look at the people going in, you think, look exactly like the people going to outpatients. Thin, worried people with no bloody... useless to all of us. We should set sort of pit traps outside health food shops, catch all those little buggers and convert them into fertiliser and grow something good out of them. I think that's a bit extreme, don't you? Huh? Health foods. I once took a television team into a health food shop and went around every item one at a time, told them where they came from, what they did at the point of origin, and the number of people they killed and what it cost us to get them there. And ABC refused to put it on because I should imagine some of them, actually went to health food shops. Healthy, I said, for whom? Not for people. Okay. Bit off the track there.
The grave danger you have in drylands, when you scale up, for water harvesting, is you get a fault in the water system. It breaks somewhere. And then you get tremendous gulling, because deserts don't have the root mass to prevent gully erosion. So you must not concentrate water in deserts. When we did our course in Mexico. It was attended all by civil engineers. A whole lot of them were civil engineers and agricultural engineers. And we went back over their roads and their constructions, and we looked at what they'd really done. And we went back over their irrigation canals and looked at the results of the irrigation. And they were intensely depressed as Mexicans that they'd actually constructed the systems that were really ruining their landscape, because they intended to do good, you know, and they had that engineering sort of gung-ho thing. You know, we'll drive this thing through the mountains, we'll bring water down to the plains, we'll irrigate the bloody Obregon district. And when they came back and looked at it, and on their own measurements, you know, found that the salt table had risen 60 metres, that they'd done hundreds of parallel gorges across the country that were becoming irreparable. They were downcast. They ran their own seminar, and the title of the seminar was Engineering the Destruction of Mexico. So they have changed profoundly, because very rarely do you engineer something on a large scale and then go around back after 10 years and see what the results were. And the results were literally horrific. An enormous displacement of peoples. Salt is self-spreading. Now, sad to say, we're moving now to the salting of lands. And of course, inevitably, to their futile attempts to desalt them. Here we are at last, the salting of lands. The salting of lands. You know, if I were God, I'd be up there zapping everybody. You know, my son was killed in an accident yesterday. It's God's will. You know, and by the time you destroy what he created to build what you want, irrigation salting, B, dry land salting. They're the two big divisions. Right. Irrigation salting is when you run exotic water from out the desert to deserts, and you irrigate. What you do is you dam the Nile way up in the headwaters. The water actually comes from Sudan and other areas, and then you spray it all over Egypt, which is a desert. You dam up in Sierra Madre in Mexico, and you bring it down and you irrigate the Obregon plains. You take water that doesn't belong to the desert and you spread it across the desert. You run miles of canals out of the rivers and you irrigate. Now, there is not a case in history, not a known case, where irrigating the desert hasn't totally obliterated the desert. Right? There is no exceptions. It doesn't matter now whether we're talking about the Garden of Eden, which is in the middle of the howling desert on the bank of the Euphrates, or whether we're talking about all of Tunisia or all of North Africa, or any place that's irrigated desert. They're all gone. Whole nations have gone up in smoke. Mexico's on its way. America's on its way. Right? Gone. Howling. It'll take 20 years to finish Israel. No more. There'll be nobody able to live there in 20 years' time. It's salting right up to the Arctic Circle. From here up, and from here to the equator. Irrigation salting. Exotic water supplied to deserts for shallow crops, for shallow-rooted crops. And therefore they can't remove it. They have a brief period where the irrigation water is available to their roots and it either goes down beyond them or evaporates. Now, shallow-rooted crops are just the ordinary, I don't know what to call it, agricultural crops? Yeah. However, you could irrigate to establish trees because the trees can remove the surplus water and keep the water table down. And so here, salting begins as the water tables rise. And the critical thing about this is you get a rising water table. You have a thing which is very simple, which has a big name. It's a hollow pipe driven down into the ground as far as you can afford to drop it in. It's a bit of downpipe, okay? Its name is piezometer, right? It's a pressure measurement thing. It's measuring the amount of head on the groundwater, and you have a little cap on, you take it off and drop a little float down and find out where the water is. As soon as that water starts to move upwards, it gets to within a metre of the surface. First thing you know is your trees start to die, and within a year it'll be to the top. Okay, so this is a critical time here. You've got a metre of soil left free of salt. As this water table rises, it brings all the salts up with it, the deep lead salts. These salts are from the deep leads. And there's masses of salts down there per million. You know, it's 20 times saltier than the sea. Now you irrigate your soybeans or whatever, wheat, soybeans. You've got to irrigate them. The roots are very shallow with these two crops. A lot of the water goes past it, goes straight down and joins the water table. So on the way to irrigation, when you're irrigating, one other factor is if you want to sprinkler irrigate your crop evaporates on the foliage of the plants, and also 18% of the water evaporates directly to air from the sprinklers. And so you get more salty water entering the soil. And that goes down too. So as this rises, and you watch it rise up your barometer, you know that when it gets to a metre, you better sell your land and move. Because from less than a metre on, you don't have to finish the job. Capillary action from surface evaporation finishes the job. So let's look at that metre of soil. 1 metre. That's your last metre you've got to use. You don't have that left now over much of Mexico. It's gone. And salt comes into it. Here comes the salt. The effect of sodium on clay particles. We spoke before about a well-structured soil. A well-structured soil is got little cloggy elements, and it's mainly humic acids that cause this clustering. As salt enters the soil, these break down. It's called deflocculation. Clay deflocculates. The particles break down and the space between the particles disappears. Now that soil will now go into much smaller volume. So it starts to shrink and the surface of this metre starts to fall. And eventually it falls 30 inches. And 6 inches is left. And all the clay is in that 6 inches. Okay? Now, as it falls, terrible pressures are released within this. So the first thing that happens is that you see is all the humus is squeezed out and lies like a tarry cover on top of the ground. So all the organic material is squeezed out of that block. And it comes up and it lays on top for a while and then it washes away. But the first thing you'll notice is a sort of thin tarry films and pools over the ground. And that washes away, it's gone. So there's no more humus in here. Then your clay deflocculates and it packs down. So what was 36 inches thick is now 6 inches thick. And that is cemented by salt. And this is called saltcrete. And that goes down forever. Okay? 60, 100, 200. As deep as there is soil, saltcrete now goes. Now suddenly, what are you going to do about it? I say to you, what are you going to do about it? Yeah. Basically, you move out. Historically, all we can do is move out. Get all that straight. If you remove the trees, replace them with shallow-rooted crops, bring in exotic water and over-irrigate, you'll get salting.
That's the whole thing.
If you don't remove the trees and you infiltrate rainwater that falls locally and you plant trees on your swales, you'll prevent salting, right? But, you know, the making of swales is inseparable from the planting of trees, especially in semi-arid lands. You must plant trees if you make swales, which is something we would mention in the area called earthworks later. If you're going to make swales, you have to plant trees below your swales, because that's what removes the water that you've stored and rehumidifies your airstream. And that's what prevents the salt table rising, the trees. Yeah. Okay? And it doesn't have any nasty anti-nutritional elements like soybeans. Or you can put soybeans into the horizon, as they've done in Mexico as a debt exchange with the United States. And in only 8 years, they've salted up either side of Obregon miles of country. And it's a whole country starts to drop. The salt's risen from 60 metres to a metre. Now it's surfacing up near the foothills. And that country is lost to Mexico forever. And now Brazil is growing soybeans for America on a debt exchange. And it too will salt up. So you can paint American cars, because that's the main use of soybeans, car paint, different colours. So you can have red cars and green cars and blue cars and black cars. South America is disposable. Okay? And it's already gone from Hermosillo to the coast, to Baja, and they're wiping it out right down to Navajo. So you can paint your cars. No other reason to grow soybeans. Hardly any of them are eaten by human beings. What, 0.00001% is eaten by people. Most of them are pressed for oil to make Juco, car paint.
You're welcome to take this trip with me. Let's wake up a few people. Peace.
Providing you with the knowledge to land yourself in an extremely uncomfortable conversation at a party with a very opinionated acquaintance.
Click here. Subscribe!